let's get stuck straight into the big news of the week, which I think was that fantastic press club address, Liz, where I think Jacinta Price, she's gotten a lot of heat. She's really, there's a phrase I always use: if you're not taking flack, you're not over the target. The amount of heat she has taken from the left for speaking some real truths here, I think she's right on the money. Liz.
She really is. And this is why the Yes camp find her so offensive, because she is, of course, Indigenous Australian herself, and she refuses to be a victim. And that just doesn't match the narrative. The truth of the matter is, if you're an Indigenous Aussie in modern day Australia, there's a lot more relying on self-determination nowadays, because you have every reason to thrive. That's what we pour billions of dollars into every single year. And this campaign, the entire Yes campaign, is actually, I see it as a racket for the ineptitude of the government over the last decades of spending that kind of taxpayer money and not knocking over any KPIs. Well, and that's her message. That's her message. This is about self-determination.
Well, Liz, I think you're spot on there. And James McPherson, we're going to have Anthony Dillon on in a little while on the program. He's a psychologist and Indigenous academic, and we're going to ask him about a lot of stuff, including the new Yes campaign ad. But I think Liz brings up a really important point, which is that so much of the left here wants to deny Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal Australians, their agency to succeed and be part of mainstream Australia, and say, oh, no, you're just perpetually a victim.
Well, James, there's 30 billion reasons why certain people want to deny Indigenous people their agency. That's how much money we spend every year propping up Indigenous organisations to try and help people who are supposedly helpless. Jacinta Price has now become, I believe, the most important politician in the country, and her message is brilliant. In this country, everybody's got a great opportunity, personal agency. It's a message of freedom and hope for Indigenous people, and more speed to her.
Well, and Liz, now we're seeing this whole issue this weekend. Now it's kicking off. We're actually going to see massive marches. I think they're going to have 50,000 people marching in Sydney. The Yes campaign is absolutely on the nose right now, and you can't spell nose without no, who are in the lead at the moment. But do you think, though, that this whole sort of big, sudden, last-minute push, with still a number of voters who are disengaged, I think it's going to be a narrower result than a lot of people are thinking at the moment. But what do you think? Do you think that the Yes campaign have left their dash too late here to get people over the line on what is, remember, a big change to the Constitution?
I don't think they've left it too late. I think they've left it too long. What the Yes camp did was play way too hard for way too long. People were so sick of this before they'd even officially launched their campaign, which I think has gone very badly for them. And we've seen that in the polls. The longer they've campaigned for, the worse that they're doing, because people are just absolutely sick and tired of it.
And there's been a lot of talk here about, this whole question about the impact of colonisation. I think we've got a grab here of somebody talking about the impacts of colonisation, whether or not this is, in fact, something that people actually talk about. Let's have a look at this.
When I go and visit people, my own family even, in remote and regional areas and in the cities, right, they don't talk about the impacts of colonisation. That's what the academics talk about.
James McPherson, that's Senator Karen Little. She's talking about how, this debate that the left has around colonisation, this has no impact on the way actual people live their lives. Is this disconnect why the Yes campaign has failed to land?
Yeah, well, I don't think most people are trying to work out, should my son go to school today? Well, I don't know. A boat arrived in Botany Bay 200 years ago. Maybe we should consider that before we make decisions about what we're going to do today. Of course, the only people talking about those things are academics. Most people are not. And hence, as you've raised, the disconnect between the campaign and the grassroots voters. The two are completely different and talking about different concerns.
Well, and, I think that there's something here, Liz, and I think there's something that I think why this whole thing, the Yes campaign, gets stuck into the weeds. It's because, not to deny that, bad things may have happened in Australia's history, but that bad things have happened in everybody's history. And there was a great piece that Douglas Murray wrote a couple of weeks ago in The Australian, and he talked about how Australia is basically caught in this doom loop of continual apology due to this rewriting of history that says nothing good ever happened about Australian history after British settlement occurred. And, it does occur to me that if we're going to really have truth-telling, then, that truth-telling would need to encompass the fact that the arrival of technology and medicines and things of that nature have also brought, as well as democracy, as well as rights for women, as well as a whole number of other advancements, has actually brought Australia to a point where you can have two different groups of people occupy the same space and actually, not have this thing where you're cleaving one off of the other. Because the whole point to me that's problematic about the voice is that it is saying forever, you Aboriginal Australians, you will always be separate, you will always be different, you will always need some other part of the Constitution to represent your interests because somehow you cannot be represented through our glorious Westminster democracy here that has made us one of the most successful and least racist multicultural countries in the world.
Yeah, and which has seen them benefit, as Jacinta Price dared to say, enormously. We are now at a point where as I said before, if you're an Indigenous Aussie in Australia, you have every opportunity to thrive. That is already, case in point, mic drop, true. And this idea that reparations still must be paid, that's in the form of this recognition. It's in the form of spending a lot of money. It's in the form of these native title claims that we're now hearing more and more about.
And by the way, Liz, on that, 55% of the country has been given in one way or another back to Aboriginal groups as part of native title claims.
I saw that post by Senator Pauline Hanson this week. Absolutely striking, with the map there that you can see just how much landmass is either currently being disputed or it has already been claimed back, so to speak. But this idea, I think, is what is rubbing against the national psyche of Aussies, because we don't like tall poppy syndrome. Nobody's special. We're all equal. And so the very idea that someone would have more recognition than others, more representation than others, is owed anything from...
And that's exactly right, because it gets to the heart of what the issue is here behind this. Anthony Albanese talks about this as being a very simple proposition. He doesn't want us to talk about the much bigger agenda of voice and treaty and truth that's out there on all of this. In fact, I think we've got a picture here, which is pretty interesting, of him claiming that everybody on all sides of politics is behind this, but it's still that voice, treaty, truth is the thing that is, if you zoom in on that, I think you see Monique Ryan's laptop says voice, treaty, truth, which suggests to me that, maybe she's going to be told, oh, that's misinformation by the PM for saying, all of that and associating with all these other bits of the agenda. But even if you want to cut all of that off, there's still the basic proposition, Anthony Albanese, is a simple one, and that is that different people get different representation and the ability to advise Parliament formally through a constitutional mechanism and their own chapter in the Constitution. This is not an advisory group like the BCA or the Tire Retread Association or some other group. This is written in its own chapter in the Constitution. That's a much bigger deal when it winds up going to the High Court. And this idea that one group gets a separate say and has another way in, I think, based on essentially a playground politics of, oh, we were here first or they were here first, I think that's disgraceful.